Hi everyone, it's Rachel, and in this video I'm going to be showing you how to make this Pokemon inspired terrarium using polymer clay and a few other materials as well. I really love the way this creation turned out, so I'm super excited to show you how you can create your own in this tutorial. So let's get started. First off, we need to make our kawaii Pokemon to put into the terrarium. To begin making Pikachu, I took some yellow polymer clay and I rolled a ball for the head and just attached on the body. I blended the clay together using my needle tool so that it was nice and secure. I then made 4 little teardrop shaped pieces and I attached these on for the front and back legs. To make the ears, you want to take some yellow and black clay and join these together, and then you can go ahead and attach these onto the head with the black tip being at the top of the ear. Moving on to the face, I firstly created 2 indents where I wanted the eyes to go, and then I added in 2 balls of black clay. For Pikachu's cheeks, I added a red circle on either side of the face. To make him look extra cute, I placed a small ball of white clay on each eye, and then I went ahead and shaped the mouth and the nose. For the tail, combine some yellow and black clay, and you can roll these together to join the 2 colours and make them look a little neater. I just used my rolling pin to do this. And then you just want to cut this clay into a lightning bolt kind of shape and attach it onto the back of the body. Next, moving on to Bulbasaur, you want to mix a light teal colour and then roll a ball of clay for the head and also shape the body. You can see here that I cut off part of the neck so that I had a flat surface to work with, and then I combined the 2 pieces together. For Bulbasaur's shell, take a darker green clay and shape it into a cone, and then go around with a needle tool or something similar to make some indents from the bottom up to the point, just for the detailing. Then you can attach the shell onto Bulbasaur's back. I then added some small pieces of clay for the 4 legs on the bottom, as well as some little triangles for the ears on the head. To make the face, I created 2 indents where I wanted the eyes to go, and then I added in 2 balls of black clay. I also went ahead off camera and added a little mouth and some cheeks. For the last little details, you want to take a slightly darker green than the body colour and create some little spots, and then just add these to Bulbasaur's head and also on the sides of the body. I always find Bulbasaur really tricky to make for some reason, so I don't 100% like the way that he turned out compared to the other Pokemon that I made, but I decided to just roll with it anyway. Next up, we're going to be making Charmander. So I took this bright orange clay and made a ball for the head, and then I also shaped his body and cut off part of the neck so that I could easily combine the 2 pieces together. I added a strip of tan coloured clay for his belly, and I just positioned this all the way up under the tail as well. Next, you want to add on some little arms as well as some legs on either side to help him stand up. And then for the face, I added my 2 balls of black clay for the eyes, and I also added on a small U-shaped piece of clay for the mouth as well. Lastly, we need to finish off the tail, so take some red and yellow clay and roll these around and mix them together to try and marble them. You don't want to mix them too much so that the colours all combine, just enough so that they kind of swirl together. Once you've done that, you can shape the piece of clay into a little teardrop flame kind of shape and then just attach it to the tip of the tail. And the last Pokemon I decided to add into my terrarium is, of course, Squirtle. So I'm starting off by making the shell, and I combined a piece of brown and tan coloured clay. Then it was time to go ahead and add some texture to the shell. So to do this, I just used a bent piece of wire, and I went around and created some indents to make a whole bunch of hexagons. And this is a very timely kind of process, but I always love the way this effect turns out. Then you want to roll a long coil of white clay and position this around the base of the shell where the dark brown and the tan coloured clays meet. Then using a round cookie cutter, I trimmed off the top part of the shell so that I could add on the head, and I took the remainder of my white coil to wrap around the neck as well. Moving on to the face, I created 2 indents where I wanted the eyes to go, and then I added in my 2 balls of black clay. I added 2 pink cheeks on either side and then also a little mouth in the center. Lastly, using some blue clay, you want to shape the 4 legs and attach these on, as well as a little swirly tail on the back of the charm. Then, because we made these out of polymer clay, you can go ahead and bake them in your oven according to your package's instructions. Now we're going to be moving on to putting together the terrarium. So I'm taking this plastic one, which I have from Sophie and Toffee, but you can find these anywhere in craft stores, and they also have glass ones as well. For the kind of like base of my terrarium, I'm also taking this granite clay, and this is an air dry clay, which again I did get from Sophie and Toffee. But if you don't have any air dry clay, you can work with polymer clay. You just need to shape it how you want and then bake it in your oven without the plastic terrarium part. So I placed my air dry clay inside and I began shaping it with my fingers, and then I put on the other half and I continued pushing the clay down so that there were no air bubbles that were trapped inside. I also tried to make it higher at the back compared to the front because I knew that I wanted to add in the little waterfall later on. So here I've just taken a bunch of bits and pieces that I'm going to be adding into my terrarium. So there's some dried moss and some flowers, as well as some shells and stones. The light green moss is from Sophie and Toffee, and then the darker green moss is one that I found at Kmart. Like I said, I'm also taking some pebbles, and then I've got this little seat which is pre-made, but again it can be made out of clay and baked in the oven ready to go. I've got a bag of shells and I just chose out some that I would like to use, and then plus I've also got my dried flowers. So I started off by taking the little wooden looking seat and I placed this into the terrarium, and then I just pushed it into the air dry clay to secure it into place. I then used my tweezers to help me add all the other little bits and pieces inside the terrarium. I added the shell at the back, and this was going to become the top of the waterfall later on. And then I just added a bunch of little stones and pebbles to decorate around the shell and also in various other places as well. So this is what it currently looks like. Now it was time to make the waterfall. So to do this, I took some plastic Glad wrap and also my UV resin. I started off by pouring some resin onto the very edge of the shell and then attaching on my plastic. I used a UV light to cure the resin, and this will help keep the Glad wrap in place almost like a glue. Then to create the water, you can pour out some UV resin onto just a little sheet of baking paper or something, and then just add a very small amount of blue pigment to give it a little bit of color if you would like to. I just kind of dipped my toothpick into a small blob of blue pigment dye and added small amounts at a time because the blue can be very strong if you add too much. Then using my paintbrush that I use for resin, I pretty much just painted on the blue water onto the Glad wrap, making sure to also add it into the shell as well as down the bottom to make like the little lake part. Then because I am using UV resin, I had to cure this under a UV light to harden it. I took some of the dark green moss and I pulled off small pieces which I then added to the sides of the waterfall. Then it was just a matter of decorating and adding all the other little bits and pieces as well. Here I'm using some Mod Podge and I'm taking some fake grasses and foliage clusters which I have for making miniatures. These are actually leftovers from the big forest creation that I made a few years ago, if anyone remembers that video. So I took a paintbrush and I just dipped it into the Mod Podge, and then I added little blobs around the stones, and then using my tweezers I positioned on where I wanted the little bushes and pieces of grass to go. You can see that I've also started to add in some of the dried flowers as well. So I started off by focusing on the back part of the terrarium, and then I worked my way down towards the front because I knew that it would be harder to reach in if I did start adding in the front details too early on. Then it was time to start adding in the Pokemon, so to do this I'm using my UV resin as a glue this time. I began by placing a little blob on a stone towards the back of the terrarium, and then I positioned in my little Charmander that I made and baked. Then to cure this into place, I just held in my UV light and made sure that the resin was hard and fully cured. I also placed some of the UV gel onto the little wooden looking seat, and this is where I decided to sit Pikachu for one of the main focal points of the terrarium. Once I added those two Pokemon, it was then time to start working on the foliage again. So this time I'm adding some more on the sides and towards the front. I'm just applying the Mod Podge onto the air dry clay, and then I'm placing little bits of the moss and the fake grasses. Next up, it was time to add Squirtle to the environment, so I placed some UV resin on a stone that I had put there, and I just stuck Squirtle on. And then because I didn't particularly like the way Bulbasaur had turned out, I kind of hid him away under all the grass at the front, so it's not completely obvious that he's there, but he is still included. And then lastly, I just added all the dried flowers to make it look nice and colourful and really finish off the piece. And then that's the terrarium completely finished, and here's how mine turned out. I had a lot of fun creating this piece, and I love the fact that it's mixed media, so I was able to include some polymer clay and resin and other little bits and pieces as well. It's also a lot larger than something I would usually make, so I was able to add a bit more detail into the piece, so I really love the way it turned out. It's also something a little bit different compared to what I would usually make, and I feel like this is something I would usually put together if I've been sent a craft kit or like a subscription box, but I did have a lot of fun coming up with the design myself and just making it for really no purpose other than that the idea popped in my head and I thought it would look pretty cool. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, please don't forget to give it a big thumbs up and also subscribe to my channel for lots more crafty videos, and I'll see you next time. Bye guys!